Notion of supremacy that South Africa took the initiative to take the state of Israel to the International Court of Justice.
First of all, my people, Africa is no longer whispering. Africa is roaring. For decades, Africa has been a subject of global conversations, analyzed, debated, and often misunderstood. Decisions about its future were frequently influenced by forces far beyond its borders. But something is changing. Africa is no longer whispering. Africa is roaring. Why am I saying this? A recent moment on the global stage captured this shift with striking clarity. While speaking in Spain, Cyril Ramaphosa delivered a message that was bold, unexpected, and deeply symbolic. Instead of echoing traditional diplomatic languages, he turned attention inward towards Africa itself. More specifically, towards Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Why? Because this is a phase of African resistance. Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, has rapidly become one of the most talked about figures in Africa politics. To some, he is a controversial. To others, he represents courage. But beyond the debate, one thing is undeniable. He symbolizes a growing frustration across the continent. Frustration rooted in decades of external influence, economic dependency, and political pressure that many Africans now openly question. Traoré leadership, along with similar development in Mali and Niger, reflect a broader shift. Governments in these countries are redefining alliances, asserting control over national decisions, and challenging long-standing geopolitical arrangements. The Sahel region is no longer just a zone of instability in global headlines. It's becoming the center of a political awakening. In recent years, the government of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have taken bold steps, including distancing themselves from traditional Western partnership and asserting stronger national control over security and resources. These actions have sparked global reactions. Some see risks, others see revolution. But within Africa, especially among young people, there is a growing sense of something as ownership. This is what makes Cyril Ramaphosa's statement so significant. When a leader of South Africa, one of the continent's most influential economies, publicly signals support for a figure like Traoré, it goes beyond a simple geopolitical gesture. It suggests a shift in a tone, a recognition that Africa's future may no longer follow the old scripts. Instead of aligning primarily with external power, there is an emerging idea. What if Africa aligns with itself? This moment raises an important question. Could Africa be on the verge of a renewed Pan-African movement? Not the symbolic unity often disguised in conferences, but a more practical, assertive alliance focused on sovereignty, shared interest, and collective strength. It's an idea that resonates deeply across the continent and the diaspora, but it is also complex. Because with bold moves comes real consequences, economic pressure, diplomatic tension, and external challenges. The path toward true sovereignty is not just simple, and it demands careful strategy, not just passion. What we are witnessing is not just political rhetoric. It's a continent at a crossroad. On one side lies the familiar system shaped by decades of global influence and dependency. On the other lies a more uncertain but potentially transformative path, one driven by African priorities and self-determination. The outcome is not yet decided, but one thing is clear. The silence is breaking. A new generation of Africans is no longer content with observation. They are questioning, challenging, and redefining what leadership and sovereignty means in today's world. Let me be clear, they are not waiting to be invited into global conversations. They are creating their own, and leaders, whether traditional or unconventional, are beginning to reflect that shift. Africans' rise is no longer a distant idea. It is unfolding in real time. The question now is not whether Africa will rise, but how far it is willing to go and at what cost. Because right now, the struggle has entered a new phase. And the Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa has just implemented that. Let's listen to his speech and hear it from the horse's mouth. Let's watch.
Notion of supremacy that South Africa took the initiative to take the state of Israel to the International Court of Justice. And even as we did, we were criticized, we were challenged, we were even insulted, but we stood firm. The reason we stood firm is that the father of our democracy said to us, our own freedom as South Africans will never be complete until the Palestinians have won their own freedom. So today, we are happy and pleased that many other countries have realized that South Africans, by taking the state of Israel to the International Court of Justice, was not mad. They now see that real genocide is happening in Gaza as well as on the West Bank. And now, illegal wars are being waged against other countries, where thousands and thousands of innocent people are being killed with bombs, with drones, and yet all that should be going towards building hospitals, towards building schools, rather than killing innocent people. Well, at the same time, there is the threat of climate crisis that is continuing to deepen. Sea levels are rising and leading many countries around the world to be poor. Billions of people across the world go hungry, have no work, have few skills. Inequality within and between countries is growing. Many societies are becoming more fragmented and isolated. Political discourse and debate is being reshaped by algorithms that fuel extremism and hate. And it is good today that you all are participating in this global progressive mobilization to change the narrative, to show the world that there are people who are progressive, who want to see the right things being done in the world. I applaud you and I thank you for standing up, for showing those who are powerful that you will not be cowards. This may be a time for crisis, but it is not a moment of doubt or despair. This is a moment for action. This is a moment for mobilization. This is a moment for renewal. For most of us alive today, there's never been a more important moment than now for global progressive revival. A revival that is confident in its values, clear in the purpose of its beliefs, and united in its resolve. This moment of severe crisis is at the same time a moment of unique opportunity. It is an opportunity to galvanize, to bring together the forces of progressive change, to forge a new path of peace, democracy, and social justice. This is the time that we must never waste. This is the time that we must embrace. And it is also an opportunity for a new generation of progressive people to emerge and to develop a vision of a better, more just, and more inclusive world. This, comrades and friends, is an opportunity to confront the forces of reaction. We have gained much ground by offering people easy answers to complex problems. They have exploited legitimate grievances about jobs, about security, about identity, and they have redirected people's fears and anger towards the most vulnerable. The progressive response cannot be only to oppose. We must offer something that is better. We must speak to the real concerns of working people, of communities that feel left behind, of young people who cannot see a future that makes sense to them. We must present a vision that is grounded in people's experiences, that recognizes their concerns, that addresses their pain and overcomes their fears. We must pursue a path that is empowering and inclusive. Across the world, we must build a united front of governments, and I'm really great that there are quite a number of governments that are represented here today. Governments that clearly declare that they are not afraid. They are not afraid of one person in the world, that they will stand up and speak for their people. That is what we want. It is good also to have political parties, trade unions, social movements, think tanks and influencers, and social activists that are bound together by a shared desire of a better world. There is a better world that we can build together. This must be a united front against inequality and poverty. It must revive the drive towards the achievement of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. This must be a movement for climate action. It must ensure that countries honor their commitments to curb emissions. We must build a global movement that enables countries to undertake just and inclusive transitions that drive social and economic development, whilst protecting affected communities and workers across the world. We must build a world of genuine multilateral cooperation with global institutions that are representative. We must stand firm on the reform of global institutions like the United Nations, that the United Nations cannot continue operating in the same way as it has in the past. We have many countries that should be represented in the United Nations Security Council. We have the whole continent of Africa with 1.4 billion people. It's not represented. We have Latin America. We have big countries like Brazil. We have big countries like India. We have big countries around the world that must be represented and have a voice. So we must advance peace through diplomacy, through dialogue, through multilateral organizations, and not have a few countries that are going to have a veto vote and block everything that talks about progress in the world. We must also address uncomfortable issues, such as the debt burden that holds back many developing economies. We must reform the financial architecture of the world and close the financing gap for development. Yes, the IMF and the World Bank must also be reformed. It cannot be institutions that continue to represent Western interests only. So the reform must be comprehensive. A global progressive revival is underway. Your presence here speaks to that. In far-flung communities, in social formations and political parties, on university campuses and factory floors, on social media and across the airwaves, the clamor for progressive change is growing. And today, here in Barcelona, this gathering in Barcelona provides greater impetus to this revival. I am certain that as we leave here today, we will leave more united, with a more cohesive voice, more purposeful, and more determined than ever when we arrive. So I leave back for Africa encouraged, elated, knowing that the people of Gaza, the people of Palestine, the people of Sudan, the people of Africa, yes, the people in the Middle East, do not stand alone. They have your support.
The summit on defense of democracy. It brought together a number of countries and governments that are essentially progressive, that want to address the challenges that the world is facing today. So we were very pleased to be in the presence of the government of Brazil, the government of Spain and Ireland and a number of others, including Ghana, as well as Caribbean countries such as Barbados. So it was a very good collection of those governments and leaders who want a response to this very uncertain world that we now live in. The world has been made uncertain. It's also been made very dangerous. We see an increase in authoritarianism. We see an increase in lack of democratic practices. And we also see conflict as well as war being used as policy, where conflicts and differences and disputes could be resolved through dialogue and discussions. Now countries resort to wars, resort to bombing other countries which they disagree with. And this militates against democracy. And in the end, in our case, we also argued that this would increase inequality. It would exacerbate poverty because the innocent people who are victims of all these conflicts are the ones who suffer the most, and inequality and poverty just grows. So the various leaders who came here were essentially saying that the progressive nations must have a response, and our response must be to mobilize the world, to mobilize progressive forces in the world, to be more focused on peace, to be more focused on resolving problems without resorting to war, and to be mobilized in adopting policies that are going to address the challenges that people face. We, of course, presented a strong input on how we should address inequality in the wake of the report that was presented and accepted at the G20, a report that we initiated as South Africa on inequality, as authored by Professor Joseph Stiglitz. And we then wanted to mobilize the various countries that are here to support the resolution that we want to take to the United Nations to establish a panel on inequality, a global panel. And we were very pleased that many nations have said that they would support that initiative at the United Nations General Assembly, which we will put forward at the end of the year. We have also initiated the acceptance of this report by the African Union. We are now taking it to the United Nations. It is important for us because addressing inequality has to be a global task. It has to be a global task because inequality weakens democracy. It makes people lose confidence in institutions. It makes people want to participate less in the affairs of their own countries because they're poor, they're unemployed. And the lack of progress in countries does militate against democracy. So we want to strengthen democracy, and it was therefore important for South Africa to join a number of other African countries to come to Spain to advocate for this message that we must strengthen democracy in all its ramifications with a view of addressing the challenges that our peoples around the world are facing. We were very pleased that Botswana was there from Southern Africa and that Ghana was also there from West Africa. And we're hoping that with the next iteration of this gathering, which will take place in Mexico, other African countries will join in and also join this progressive mobilization. After the summit, we attended a rally, which was attended by many, many people, about 4,000 or so people from both Spain and a few other countries around Europe. And so that too was the high point because it showed the revival of progressive forces around the world that were essentially saying we are not going to sit back and just see the destruction of democracy, the utilization of undemocratic means of declaring wars, of very negative ways of resolving conflicts. So for us, participation here was very important as it advances the interests that we have. Trade unions were also in attendance. COSATU was here as well as a number of other trade unions from various parts of the world. So this was a very important moment, almost historic. And for us, it reminded us of the mobilization that took place during the struggle against apartheid. We even reflected on that. And we encouraged those who were present to also join the mobilization in support of the people of Palestine, that their struggle should also be their struggle. And also advocated for support for the people of Sudan, who now have 14 million people displaced because of the war that is raging there. So it was an important moment in the current history of the world to have this type of mobilization for progressive forces. Thank you.